Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this Chatham House webinar on Ukraine's fight for its people. Thank you to everybody who is joining us today or later on for the recorded version. My name is Judith Goff. I am an Associate Fellow at Chatham House working on Ukraine. I'm also a Senior Advisor at Actagon and the former British Ambassador to Ukraine. I am delighted that this morning for this important discussion we have such an expert and distinguished panel joining us, and congratulations to Chatham House for its convening power. First of all, I'm delighted to introduce Oleksiy Chernyshov, who is the Deputy Prime Minister of Ukraine and Minister for National Unity. He is also held a number of other public sector positions, including being Minister for Communities and Territories Development. So welcome, Minister. We have a second Minister, that is Vít Rakušan. Welcome. First Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of the Interior of Czechia, leader of the Mayors and Independent Movement, and was also Mayor of Kolín for 9 years. So welcome to you, Minister, as well. Olga Tokaryuk, an Academy Associate of Chatham House's Ukraine Forum, a widely published journalist by background with a focus on international affairs and counter-disinformation research. Olga, very much welcome to you. And last but not least, Elena Vishnar-Malinovska, the Deputy Director of the Ukraine Service Unit at the European Commission and Head of Reconstruction and Accession. Welcome to you too, Elena. So we're going to have a discussion today on a subject that I think is of utmost importance for Ukraine and the future of Europe, and that is Ukraine's fight for its people. I think any of those of us who have worked with Ukraine or closely on Ukraine know just what an extraordinary amount of talent and human capital Ukraine possesses, both within the country and outside the country. But it is a fact that 7 million Ukrainians have left Ukraine since the start of the war, or close to 7 million. And that is about 1 in 6 of the pre-war population, and mostly women and children. Many of these are highly skilled and educated. 2/3 of the adults under temporary protection in the EU have completed tertiary education, and more than 40% have a master's degree or higher. And 3 years since the start of the 2022 invasion, displaced Ukrainians are increasingly integrated into their host countries more quickly than any other refugee group, in fact. But many, of course, sadly, are working in jobs that do not match their skills. Now, going forward, Ukraine's Ministry of Economics estimates that 4.5 million workers will be necessary for the reconstruction effort when peace comes. And many Ukrainians abroad, both refugees and those who left before 2022, and indeed many in the long-standing diaspora, have expressed a willingness to contribute to Ukraine's reconstruction. So this panel is going to discuss these issues. I would also like to just draw your attention to this excellent paper by Olga Tokaryuk on Ukraine's fight for its people. Recommended reading, I think it will be put up in the chat, which really sets out the issues far better than I have done, it has to be said, but comes with a list of really good recommendations, both for the Ukrainian government, but also for partner governments in the European Union. But this panel will discuss the push and pull factors, how this extraordinary human capital can be harnessed for Ukraine's reconstruction, and what Ukraine can do and the EU and partner countries can do in support. And of course, what we're looking at here is the practicalities. The research has already been done. What are the practical answers that we need? So each panelist will make opening remarks. I will then open it up for questions, which you can enter into the chat, and hopefully we can have a really good discussion on what, for me, is an extremely important topic. So first of all, Minister Chernyshov, I'm going to turn to you for your opening remarks.
Julia, thank you so much, and I'm very happy to welcome you, Your Excellency, Minister Rakušan. Pleased to see you, and warm welcome to everyone. I would like to start by thanking Chatham House for making this opportunity possible and for initiating this conversation. And I would like also to thank representatives of the European Commission, international organization, and civil society for their continued support of Ukraine during these most challenging times. The topic we're going to discuss today is very important and fundamental as soon as we are facing the largest migration wave in Europe since World War II. And it has a very deep demographic, humanitarian, and national challenge. I would also like to emphasize all of us, and I will try to be very short in the beginning in order to allow Q&A session to be more interesting. So I would like also to emphasize that Ukraine has been losing, in a way, its population for many years. And if we would go back to the year of gaining independence in 1991, Ukraine has been a country of 52 million people. And every next 5 and 10 years, we've been going down in population in the beginning as a result of social and economic reasons and for slow reforming of the country. And the dynamic, which still was due to be better in economic development and other critical and fundamental reforms. And I think that we should not only concentrate on the war refugees, which is our main priority right now. And we once again thank our international allies for supporting Ukrainians worldwide and providing temporary protection status. But also we should think about future Ukraine and the way Ukraine develops its economy and develops its state and country in order to provide opportunities and incentives for Ukrainians to plan their life and careers in Ukraine. Now we are facing an important moment of our lives. Ukraine is a very solid and free nation, and the number of Ukrainians worldwide is at this very moment is very close to 60 million. We have 25 million Ukrainians abroad. If we would analyze all three categories of Ukrainians that are living abroad, including waves of migration, including war refugees, and of course, ethnic Ukrainians in diaspora throughout the world. And I think that is the good news. The bad news, the population of Ukraine declines. Demography is bad, and the prospect is rather limited. We should concentrate on providing a new Ukrainian model, a post-war development model that will incentivize Ukrainians to come back home from one hand, and moreover, would incentivize others to pick Ukraine as their home. At this very moment, and as you have rightly said, Judith, our calculations show that our shortage of employment market, of the labor market after the war, is very close to 4 million employees. It's a very serious number, and you cannot cover this number only with the returnees. We will do everything possible to develop this opportunity. But once again, I would like to emphasize the future of post-war Ukraine is very much dependent on the success of the critical and system reforms, economic reforms, and the ability to develop the GDP. In the end, I would like to state that Ukrainians' future is very much dependent on the ability of Ukraine to enter the European Union as soon as possible. And I would like to remind all of us that European Union is not only a political organization. First of all, it's economic organization or economic union. For that, we should develop the strong economy of Ukraine as a post-war country capable to be a part of the future European Union. And once again, using this opportunity, I would like to thank our partners worldwide, and especially in the European Union. Here we have a great moment to share this panel with Rakushan, who is a great supporter of Ukraine, and the Czech Republic is doing a lot. And we have just signed, led by our leaders, appropriate agreement with Czech Republic on support of setting up a unity hub in Prague, in Czech Republic, that we plan to open very soon as a result of our cooperation. And I think we have a great moment to hear to Mr. Rakushan on further developments in this and other areas, of course. Thank you very much once again for inviting, and I would be pleased to answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. That's a really helpful introduction, both highlighting the scale of the challenge, but also, I think, the opportunity there will be going forwards. Minister Rakushan, Mr. Chernyshov has done my introduction for me in some ways by highlighting just how much Czechia has done for Ukraine. But I wonder if you could set out a little the approach that your government and country has taken, and perhaps what other countries can learn from that experience, and what recommendations you would make.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for the invitation to this important and timely discussion. Hello, Minister, dear Alexei. Nice to see you again. So the Czech Republic fully welcomes and supports the efforts of Ukrainian government to motivate to return of its citizens. We understand how hard will be this job, the reconstruction of post-war Ukraine, and we all hope, dear Alexei, this time will come soon. We are ready to continue promoting and also assisting with voluntary returns to Ukraine. As reintegration assistance is currently not available for Ukraine at the national or European level, we are discussing the preparation of a possible national reintegration assistance program today. To ensure smooth reintegration of returnees, it is necessary that Ukraine establish a solid network of support reintegration centers in individual Ukrainian regions, which would be partners of unity hubs in the EU. In these centers, the Ukrainians will find systematic support in the areas of housing, education, healthcare, etc. Recently, the Czech Republic, as you said, dear Alexei, and Ukraine agreed on joint declaration to establish a unity hub in Prague, and we all hope this time will come soon. And it is based on already existing Ukrainian consultation center of the International Center for Migration Policy Development in Prague, and we still have good experience. Unity Hub in Prague should provide consultation services to Ukrainian citizens with focus on returns and reintegration, but it shall not serve as a substitute for the embassy in providing consular services. About the future of temporary protection, from my point of view, I am the Minister of Interior of the Czech Republic since December 2021. So I was by the decision making of the EU at the beginning of the war, and I think the temporary protection, it has been one of the best decisions of the EU. But I really think we should discuss now about the future of temporary protection for persons from Ukraine. And we as the Czech Republic really strong supports a coordinated approach at EU level, and timely decision. Timely decision is really necessary because just it gives the future for the people living in the EU now. And as you know, we remain the country most affected per capita. Our reception system and public services are really under enormous strain from the beginning of the war. The population of the Czech Republic is about 11 million inhabitants, and we have about 400,000 persons with temporary protection in the Czech Republic. But the whole number of Ukrainians living in the Czech Republic is higher, because we had also some Ukrainians living here before the war. And what I have to say, in the event of sustainable ceasefire in Ukraine, the EU must act swiftly. It should notably suspend temporary protection for new arrivals. And it's also necessary for Ukraine to prevent further demographic crisis in the country, as well in the EU security interest. And it's also the reason why we have to support all activities on Ukrainian side to get the people back. So our priority now is the stabilization of internal refugees and the reintegration of Ukrainians returnees from the EU. In 2024, the amount of our assistance within our humanitarian programs, Medevac and Aid in Place, reached about 5 million euro. The same amount will be allocated also this year. Moreover, several projects have been implemented and others are planned for 2025 in the area of security development cooperation. And one, I think, really huge success of the Czech Republic is the integration of Ukrainian nationals to the Czech labor market. Now we have 158,000 people working and another 14,000 actively seeking jobs, which represents 70% of adult persons with temporary protection in the Czech Republic. It is really one of the highest numbers in the whole EU. However, large share of them works on positions requiring lower qualification than they have. Judith, that's the problem, as you mentioned, and it's also necessary to focus on this area in the next months and years. And we also increase our effort to prevent labor exploitation. Within the labor office, we now have 20 specialists for persons with migration background. We also seek new ways to provide easily accessible and understandable information about the risk of work exploitation, about living and working conditions in the Czech Republic, and all possible aspects of working of foreigners here in the Czech Republic. We have prepared some manuals and spots for them in several language versions, and very good outreach has been achieved in cooperation with influencers who are third country nationals. And also in March 2022, after the beginning of the war, the persons with temporary protection were provided access to the Czech social services system. And we still have these benefits, but in connection with the high numbers of working people, we don't need to pay so much for these benefits. And it's also important for the mood of the Czech population. Yes, also we in the Czech Republic, also we have internal political discussions. Also we have high number of populists And also we have election in October. And the discussion is not always easy, but when we are able to show, to demonstrate to our society, to our public, that the Ukrainians are really active, that they are helpful for our economic today, it's also important for the acceptation within our society, within the Czech society. And I have to mention more than 70% of Czech people have helped somehow to Ukrainians. And it's really number which was surprising also for me. And it's really the proof that the Czech society and the Czech people are ready to help. The last topic is the situation of the young people coming from Ukraine in the Czech Republic. We have to focus on the young generation because when they attend schools, when they are the part of the education system of our country, it can have also a positive impact on the future of Ukraine. When the young people are well educated, it can bring benefits also for Ukraine in the future. We don't have problems with younger children in primary schools, but we don't have such high numbers of young Ukrainians studying at Czech secondary schools. And it could be also some career limits for them in the future. So we try to focus on this teenagers generation, and we try to create special supporting programs for them in the Czech Republic. And as I said at the beginning of the war, we paid more than 200,000 beneficiaries who got the social benefits from the Czech state. Now is the number about 90,000 people. So the number is really much lower than before. And the last sentence, the last message, the Czech Republic, Czechia has been adapting its system to the evolving situation with one simple goal: to better respond to the needs of Ukrainian citizens with temporary protection. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Minister Rakusan, and thank you very much for setting out the very concrete steps that Czechia has been taking in support of Ukrainians who have sought refuge in your country. Now, I understand that, Minister Chernyshov, you may have to leave a little earlier than planned. You're at risk of being called away. So just not to miss the opportunity, if I may, before I come on to Olga Tokaryuk, I'd just like to ask a question to you. I mean, we've heard a lot from Czechia about the concrete steps they have been taking. We have about 300 or 400 people online, which includes both diaspora who are willing to engage and help, and policymakers from across the EU and Canada and the UK. So I'm just wondering if you could say a little more about what Ukraine plans to do in practical terms to attract Ukrainians home. We know the longer that refugees stay overseas, the more integrated they become. How does Ukraine plan in practical terms to attract people home? And how can the diaspora help in this? I've got lots of questions that were sent to us separate from the diaspora who want to help, but would like a clear steer from you as to how they can do so.
Thank you very much. Once again, I'm very happy to be here with you, and thank you for raising this topic. Ukrainians and the future of Ukrainians coming back home? That is the question that I'm being asked every day. And I ask this question to myself as well, and consult with other government officials in other countries. But what is more important, meeting Ukrainians in every country they are. This week I've already been in 2 different countries to meet Ukrainian diaspora and have some fresh thoughts about that. We are constantly being asked how many Ukrainians will come back home after the war is over. Obviously, that is the main reason to consider coming back home. And our surveys and our polls show that, and discussions and meetings, of course, that about 30% of Ukrainians will be seriously considering returning back home after the end of the war. Simultaneously, we have another 30% of Ukrainians out of this number that decided to stay in Europe forever. And there is 40% in between. And those 30% will monitor the situation and see the development of Ukraine, the opportunities, and will decide further on. You're exactly right, Judith. The time is not on our side. It's 3+ years. It's a lot. And the war is still going on. And, there are kids that are already no longer minors. They're no longer kids. There are new children born. There are new pupils in school, and there are people graduated. 4 years is a long time, especially in the childhood. And of course, the integration is very intensive, and we should remember that. So anyway, it's 30% coming back within the first half a year after the end of the war. 30% that are not coming back at all, and 40% that will monitor the situation to make the decision later. We will, of course, encourage Ukrainians to come back home, and we will provide, through our Unity Hub centers, appropriate services, incentives, and motivation in setting up an individual plans of returning home, including schooling for kids, including job market, including vacancies, including other things, lodging, and many more. But what is most important, the formula of Ukrainian people coming back is very much dependent on the factor of Ukrainian stability and the dynamic of economic development in Ukraine. Once Ukraine is successful economically and is dynamically developing, the economic volume will pave the way and will provide the incentive opportunities and will welcome new employees and provide appropriate conditions for that. And I'm sure that is the only way to do it. That is why when I'm being asked about the question on how many people will come back home, I'm always answering that we should concentrate on the percentage of economic growth in the next 10 years of Ukraine. Once it is successful, once Ukraine is the most developed and dynamic economy in the Eastern Europe in the next 10 years, we'll definitely see a lot of Ukrainians coming back, and not only Ukrainians, because the market will foster and the market will develop. That's the only solution. And clearly, Ukraine is an equity shortage market. Ukraine will require additional equity that should come only as a result of structural reforms within the environment of Ukrainian bureaucracy. And obviously, we definitely concentrate on very well-known parameters of decentralization, market liberalization, and privatization that should appear very fast, and law enforcement and rule of law should be very effective and transparent. This would pave the way for further investment into Ukraine and the economic growth. On other part of your question of how can Ukrainians abroad support, I think the biggest support and the biggest investment into our future, and my sincere proposal is to keep ties and connection with Ukraine, to keep Ukrainian identity, to develop yourself as Ukrainian. I always say that Ukrainian state and Ukrainian government treats every Ukrainian equally, regardless of the place of living now or in the future. We are all one Ukrainian family. Please keep your Ukrainian identity. Please develop yourself as a Ukrainian and stay connected to Ukraine, support Ukrainian state, develop the future, and please be an active part of Ukrainian community. Once again, today you can live in other country, but it doesn't mean you stop being Ukrainian. You're part of our family, and we should develop it and make it stronger. That's the main thing I would ask to the people abroad now. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. And just that's really helpful, and I think will obviously resonate very well with Ukrainians overseas. I think one of the things I like about your job title is you are Minister for National Unity, which I think is a very well thought through title and a very inspiring one. Again, a question that has come through from the diaspora is that there is, in some areas, resentment towards those that left Ukraine after the invasion, and the reasons for that will be complicated. What thought has the government given to the unity part of your job description and social cohesion? Because when people move, the risks can obviously sometimes be more than one might suspect.
You're right. Some might hear different narratives within the Ukrainian society, and which is more important abroad, about certain differences in Ukrainian society and different perception of Ukrainians in Ukraine and perception by Ukrainians in Ukraine, those Ukrainians who are abroad. This is definitely an extreme exaggeration, and the thing is, does not happen in the massive numbers and volumes, although we cannot neglect it in total. But in any way, I think we should continue our way as a one family. People that moved abroad during the full-scale invasion, they actually were doing that not in the motivation of tourism. They were trying to save their lives and to save their children. And we all understand it. And that is absolutely clear. And once again, we're very thankful to the European and international allies that helped us and helped Ukrainian people to accommodate there. Nevertheless, I would like once again to emphasize that our attitude and treatment of all Ukrainians, regardless of the place of their residence now, is absolutely equal. All the rights and possibilities are absolutely equal. And I once again would like to thank our Ukrainian diaspora abroad for their constant support and assistance of Ukraine, sometimes with volunteer support, sometimes with financial means, sometimes with other actions, sometimes with their emotions to support Ukrainian people. That is very valuable, and I once again thank you. So the only thing I would like to concentrate, please keep your Ukrainian identity, because today Ukrainian identity is not a part of your blood test. It's actually your values, your free values, democratic values, your European choice. That is all about Ukraine, and that is the things and the values we are all fighting for. And you're fighting for them as well. I'm now addressing this to our diaspora abroad. And sometimes you're fighting them also with the equal manner. And thank you once again for that.
Thank you, Minister. I'm sure many listening will find those messages both encouraging and reassuring. Olga, I'm going to turn to you as the author of this fantastic report. You've heard a lot from the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Unity, and also from the Czech Minister about measures being taken in both countries. From your research, what kind of incentives do you think that Kyiv should create to encourage return? And perhaps you might also want to build on some of the Minister's comments on leveraging and involving the global diaspora.
Thank you, Judith. Thank you, everyone, for attending this important webinar. Thank you, ministers, for your contributions. It was really reassuring to hear this very encouraging conciliatory rhetoric from you, Minister Chernyshov, because I think perhaps Ukraine for many years lacked this coherent strategy towards diaspora and appreciation of diaspora's role in Ukraine's development and in Ukraine's future. And now that is currently being formed, I think that's a very correct step in the right direction. So thank you for your efforts. Before answering your question, Judith, on the recommendations, I think I would just very briefly want to speak on behalf of Ukrainian refugees who are missing today on this panel. But in a way, I am one of them, because I've also had to leave Ukraine since the start of the full-scale invasion. I'm a single mother with a child in a foreign country who had to rebuild my life from scratch, and who works really hard on maintaining both my own ties with Ukraine, but also my child's ties to Ukraine. So I think it is really, really important, when we have this conversation, obviously to consider the interests and needs both of Ukraine and also situations of the countries that host Ukrainian refugees. There is, of course, an immense work that has been done by them. And, I think Ukrainians are extremely grateful for the warm welcome that they've encountered in many countries that hosted them. However, what I really want to focus on is, this the profile of a Ukrainian refugee. As you know, most of them were women with children. Most of them had high degrees of qualifications. They worked very often in skilled jobs in Ukraine, and they didn't have an intention to leave Ukraine. So they had to flee the country because of Russia's full-scale invasion. So the majority of these people, they were not economic migrants. They were not looking for, better economic future for them or their families abroad. They had to flee because of war. And obviously that also explains why their intention to return was so high initially. That's more than 70% of Ukrainian refugees initially in the fall of 2022 said they would be willing to return. But then we also see that that's how these intentions were changing as children settled in, as they went to school, they learned the language, as also these Ukrainian refugees, they found the jobs, they integrated, sometimes at an enormous cost to them. It took an enormous effort, both physical and mental workload, to integrate in countries they maybe have never been to, they knew nothing about. And, and therefore, it really took them a lot of effort to rebuild their lives. So, and it is not surprising that 3 years later, we see that their intentions to return, they are decreasing. Now there is less than half of Ukrainians abroad, Ukrainian refugees who fled since 2022, who say that they want to return. So I think this needs to be taken also into consideration, both by Ukraine, but also by countries that are hosting Ukrainian refugees in defining future policies. People need to be at the center of these policies. There are the needs of the countries, but the needs and the intentions and the will and situations of the people need to be taken into account as well. And I've done more than several dozen interviews with Ukrainian refugees in different countries for this paper. I've done a focus group with them here in the UK, and I speak to Ukrainian refugees on a daily basis, also because that's my circle of communication, and because of also my work as a journalist, I've written about this topic. I continue to take interest in it. Currently, I also work on looking at the attitudes towards Ukrainian refugees in various countries, and how Russia actually fuels some negative sentiment towards them in countries with big Ukrainian presence, such as Poland or Czech Republic. That is also something to be taken into consideration, that there is an effort to incite tensions around the presence of Ukrainian refugees in countries that host them. From what emerges from these conversations and from these observations that I've done is that security remains the main precondition for Ukrainians' return. So when we are talking about, the return of refugees, how to incentivize it, we cannot leave aside the issue of durable, sustainable peace in Ukraine, not a ceasefire, as was mentioned earlier today, because ceasefire in nature is something temporary. But we have to talk about durable, sustainable peace. People are not going to return if they do not trust that Ukraine will not be invaded by Russia again, if there is, a ceasefire, if Ukraine does not have any security guarantees, if its long-term security is under risk, which is currently the case. Currently the situation looks as, Ukraine is not being offered any durable security guarantees, no NATO membership, no presence of, other countries' contingents on its territory to secure peace. So it does not look for Ukrainian refugees as if, the security situation will improve in the long term, and that there will be durable, sustainable peace. And I think the onus here is not as much on Ukraine and on the Ukrainian government, because this is something that the Ukrainian government also argues and advocates for, this need for sustainable, durable peace. Here, the onus is on the partners, on the EU countries, on other partners of Ukraine that need to insist, that there might be security guarantees, there might be, conditions in place and costs on Russia to stop the war, to prevent another aggression on Ukraine. So that's the first precondition, more important than the economy, more important than all the other things. And then obviously, of course, the economy is important as well. A lot of Ukrainian refugees who I spoke to and who say they would like to return to Ukraine one day, they come from the occupied territories, or they have lost their housing, they have lost their jobs, and they say that, in addition to security, what they need to return to Ukraine is to know that they will be offered support, they will be given assistance by the state with access to housing, to possibly social housing, something that has not existed in Ukraine so far, but the concept that might be worked on, and something that must appear in Ukraine for people to return. So access to affordable social housing, access to jobs, access to education, another very, very important factor, because as I said, so many Ukrainians who fled abroad, they fled because of the fear for their children. Around 1/3 of Ukrainians abroad are children. They need access to education. They need more, bomb shelters built in Ukraine. Unfortunately, something again that is not being done at the rate and with speed that it should be. Online education is not a long-term solution, and a lot of children in Ukraine, the only type of education that they had access to in the last 3 years was online education. And, especially after a lot of Ukrainian children had access to very good quality education in the host countries, obviously, the choice that the parents and the kind of the main obstacle maybe for returning to Ukraine is knowing that their kids could have access to good quality education, to safe environment abroad, and something that they can't get access to in Ukraine at the moment. So these are already some of the preconditions and recommendations that I've outlined that are both dependent on Ukraine's efforts, but as much also on other countries. And another thing that I would like to mention in my opening remarks, and I'll try to be brief, is that whereas temporary protection directive offered to Ukrainians by the European Union countries, and also, temporary protection status that other countries adopted, like the UK or Norway or the United States or some others, Canada, is really something novel and worked really well, and has proven to be a very quick and efficient way to give security to people in the short and medium term. Its main difference from the typical, previously adopted procedures of asylum and refugee status is that it doesn't give any long-term security. It doesn't give any long-term certainty to these people who are granted this status. So, of course, like national governments, they have a lot of kind of their own freedom in deciding what policies to shape and whether they are willing and able to offer Ukrainians who currently under temporary protection status some shift to another form of status, to those people who want to remain, who want to stay in their host countries, who maybe have found jobs, who some people have found partners in their new countries, new babies were born, and they might want to continue staying there. So some countries are offering offering these pathways for long-term settlement to Ukrainians, but the majority of them doesn't. And that leaves Ukrainian refugees, although technically they are not refugees, as I said, they were not given refugee status, they were given temporary protection status, which is very much different from that one of the refugee. That leaves a lot of these displaced Ukrainians who are abroad in a certain sort of a limbo, because on the one hand, they might want to return to Ukraine, but they do not have access to housing. They are afraid, for safety of their kids and for their access to education. On the other hand, they also have no certainty that they would be able to stay in the host countries when, the current temporary protection status expires. And, that prevents a lot of people from building any long-term plans. That has a very negative impact on their mental health, on the mental health of children. It has also an impact on the ability of people to access job market and rental housing in the host countries, because a lot of landlords and employers, they are unwilling to offer, jobs or properties to people whose legal status in the countries is not defined. That is, that people who have only a couple of months or maybe a year left on their temporary protection visas. So this is also something to be considered, again, with this kind of human interest approach in mind, because we are talking about people, and Europe has already experienced in its history, waves of foreign workers in 1970s who were invited to fill jobs. And famously, there was a quote afterwards, by one of the writers who said, "We expected brains and hands, but people came." And that's again the same thing with Ukrainians abroad. They came to be protected, they got this protection, but they are people who want to have certainty over their future, and this certainty needs to be offered for them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Olga. We'll return to questions in a moment. But again, recommending to anybody online your very comprehensive paper with all of its recommendations. Thank you. Elena, I'm going to talk to you for an EU perspective. We've heard from Czechia, we've heard from Ukraine, we've heard from the research. I wonder if you can set out what steps the EU is taking to support Ukraine's reconstruction efforts, and how the EU offer, I haven't used the word integration there, I've used offer, but please correct me if you think that's the wrong terminology, to Ukraine. How will that help strengthen its human capital?
Thank you very much. First of all, I'm very pleased to be on this very prominent panel with two ministers and with Olga, whom I follow on social media since the beginning of the full-scale invasion. Let me start a little bit with my personal experience. We are normally always introduced as official of the Commission, as civil servants, but I also have my personal experience, though not as a refugee, but I live already for 25 years in a country that is different from the country of my origin. I'm half Czech, half Slovak, and actually migrated for, I would say, reasons of family reunification, having a husband from a different country of the EU, but also right before the big enlargement where my country entered the Union. So I have also seen this sort of big enthusiasm, but at the same time erosion in the countries of origin where a lot of people like me moved to Brussels, Luxembourg. Second, I'm hosting a family, so I'm really, I feel sometimes having skin in the game in these discussions. Although I must say it's very difficult to say how Ukrainians feel. It's really a story on its own. And I think what I have seen since the beginning of full-scale invasion was a lot of leadership, both on the sides of Ukrainians, but also on the side of the member states, politicians, EU, etc. Mr. Vít Rakušan, who is on this panel, I still remember his tweet where he said essentially, yeah, we are hosting this evening a couple coming from Ukraine. This these were the early days of the invasion. Now, let me get to what we are trying to do from the Commission perspective and how we try to support the efforts, where I would like to underscore it's for Ukraine also to organize these sort of returns and to create conditions for Ukrainians to be attracted to go back home. I fully agree with what was said, that Ukraine has been a economically stagnating country well before the war started. There has been outflow from eastern Ukraine to western Ukraine, and then towards countries. I still remember, from the 90s, Ukrainians coming to former Czechoslovakia, or then Slovakia or Czechia. So that was a trend that has been just turbocharged, if you want, by the war. So what we are trying to do is, first of all, the EU is paying essentially half of the budget of Ukraine. We provide the what is called budgetary support, so the means to Ukraine to support socioeconomically its population, to allow the rebuilding of housing, to repair the energy systems, and of course also to support the military forces as it needs to protect itself. Just this year, 84% of the external funding coming to the budget comes from the EU and its member states. So it is very substantive. Now, on the reconstruction, we try to create investments and to show that Ukraine is a place for business. So there we work very closely with the international financial institutions in the strategic areas, again, of housing, of agriculture, of industry processing, because there it is where the qualifications of Ukrainians seem to be happening. And we hope, of course, that this will kickstart the economy, because what Ukraine needs to become not a country depending on donors' money, but to be able to create its own revenues. But of course, whatever investments or whatever financial flows come to Ukraine, they will be futile without the possibility of preparing the project, absorbing the money. And this is where the people come very much at the forefront. So I think we are in a sort of big dilemma here, because at the same time there is a wish of many Ukrainians who have been staying in the EU to be part of these societies, their children being already integrated. I see it with the family I'm hosting for 3 years now. While there is also a need, an important need for Ukrainians to return with their qualifications, with a high education, and build Ukraine of tomorrow. Today, you have 700,000 children being schooled in the EU, and the European Union is giving at least 4 billion this year to member states to be able to somehow support Ukrainians, just to respond maybe to the point made by Minister Rakushan, that indeed there is a strain on countries, but there is also the EU money that comes with it. Minister Chernihiv spoke about the sort of, emotional aspect of being Ukrainian abroad. There's also an economic aspect to it. Remittances by the Ukrainian working abroad actually amounted to over 3% of GDP in last year. So it can be huge. And we have seen it in Bosnia-Herzegovina. It went up to 10-15% in the past, until the government has actually picked on that. So on the let's say on where we stand, and here I meet what Olga Tokaryuk mentioned, there is already 4 years now granted of temporary protection in the EU. And while this is probably not giving you a full prospect for the future, it's already a lot for a regime that is meant to be temporary by nature. So that's the first point. But there is a recognition, I think, that we cannot just go on with prolonging this system, year by year. But there is really a need for a more comprehensive solution in the future. And such solutions that will need to be discussed is also pivoting for for Ukrainians living abroad to different statuses, to have access to the single permit, to the researcher permit, student permit, blue card, this kind of statuses, to be able to fully integrate, to be able, for instance, if you want to transfer, we have seen it from the Turkish diaspora, to transfer your sort of entitlement pension rights that you acquired, for instance, in Germany, to transfer it to another country. So there must be this sort of thinking going on to help and to support the return of Ukrainians. So final point, security does matter a lot. There is what we see from the risk perception in the business environment, but otherwise it is perceived that the Western Ukraine, and we see it, may be a safer place now. I mean, the front lines are definitely more in the eastern regions, and so we see an appetite in the investment side, which will come, of course, with some job openings, which will come with the offer of housing, which will come with the other investments. So it can be a sort of spillover effect that comes. We have pushed very much for reforms in Ukraine. If you speak to people who have never let's say, really very much dwelt on Ukraine, there is this perception of corruption that still, is happening, and I can tell you that many of the reforms that Ukraine has committed to and has carried out are already going very much in this direction of better judiciary, better rule of law, better access to courts, better enforcement, so that Ukraine can really become a sort of modern country where the young Ukrainians want to return in the future and have families.
Thank you, Elena. And I have to say, having served in Ukraine myself and the pre-invasion period, I think you're absolutely right on the corruption piece. One should not underestimate the level of reform and the measures that have been put in place in Ukraine to tackle corruption. I think it has seen an extraordinary change within Ukraine, and that the perceptions still hang around. It takes time to shake off the perceptions, but actually that picture is much improved upon the Ukraine of, say, 10 or 15 years ago. And that has been a huge effort by the Ukrainian government and also Ukrainian civil society, it has to be said. Thank you to all of the panelists. I'm going to return, if I may, to Czechia and Minister Rakusan for a couple of questions, if you are still online. I'm just going to check for a sign of life. If not, I will go. Yes, just checking. Thank you. Sometimes these connections can play us up. Thank you very much for your presentation and outlining the steps that Czechia has taken. I think it's really important to hear from your experience. You mentioned populism, Minister, and the upcoming elections, and I'll be very careful to say that this is not a Czech phenomenon. This is a widespread phenomenon in the Western world at the moment, but you did mention it. And we know that in a number of countries, not just Czechia, there has been in pre-election periods some targeting of Ukrainians to play into certain narratives. I wonder if I could ask you what steps your government has taken to communicate on these issues and to minimise some of the tensions and to minimise some of the risks of disinformation about the Ukrainian diaspora and Ukrainian refugees in your country?
Thank you for this question. Yes, it's a really challenging time for all of us within the EU, Europe. So the populism, it's a phenomenon which we can see also in all democratic states, not only in the young democracies, which we have here in the Czech Republic. What we really try to do is to show also for the Czech public the exemplar of good practice. So to show also the number of really integrated people, not only in our labor market, but also in the schools, and also some good exemplar of cooperation between Ukrainians and Czech population and the activity of the community here. And also we have some official numbers, some proofs that, for example, the security in the Czech Republic is still on high level. We are one of the most secure countries of the whole EU, even if we have about 400,000 coming people to the Czech Republic. So we can show that the influence, even if our systems are under pressure, for the life of the Czech people can be also positive. Not only because we showed our Czech nature that we are able to help in these bad situations, but that we also have, and I have to speak frankly, also economic benefits from Ukrainians living in the Czech Republic today. And to Elena, yes, it's a huge challenge today for the public discussions. I spoke to my Ukrainian counterpart 2 years ago, and he asked me not to speak about integration. Minister, please speak only about some kind of adaptation, not integration. But we have to speak about integration, because the process of integration of the Ukrainians living in the Czech Republic, for example, in the labor market, in the education system of our country, it can bring huge benefits also for the future of Ukraine. The people can bring the know-how to Ukraine, and also the education, languages, knowledge, and so on. So also Ukraine can profit in the future from this situation, that they have the people abroad and they will take their know-how to Ukraine back. Yes, we have to speak about all possibilities, how to help them to call the people back. It's also the reason why we want to create this Ukrainian hub in Prague, in Czech Republic, and we really try to do our best to help Ukrainians. But we also have to see the numbers, and we know that more than 55% of Ukrainians living in the Czech Republic today, they say officially they want to stay. And when we communicate with our Ukrainian colleagues, the communication has to be very open. And your question, Judith, what are the concrete steps which wants Ukraine to do in the coming time? And coming time, yes, it's necessary, because it's a task for Ukraine to create the network which will be helpful in this process. And our task is to do our best for the mood in our societies, for the upcoming and still ongoing support for Ukraine itself, for Ukrainians living here, and also for the integration process of them.
Thank you, Minister. I think that's a really encouraging way of describing it. We often hear the negative impacts of people movements, but to put it in such positive terms, I think is really heartening. And I think, you know, the sense that I have is that Ukraine's security and prosperity is Europe's security and prosperity. So the solutions have to be jointly owned. I just wonder if you could go a little more into something that Elena touched on, temporary protected status. The word temporary, it's been 4 years. I'm not necessarily asking you to announce a government policy, but what's your sense of where that might go in the future? And that tricky balance between integrating and supporting people who have come to your country and supporting them to return. Because, of course, the more integrated people become, the harder it is to return.
Yes, temporary protection. Is it temporary protection or not? Or it's just a status of some protection, which will be here forever? No, I hope not. But we, as the Czech Republic, Czechia, we created partly exit strategy for the Ukrainians living here in the Czech Republic. We have for them also special status that when they don't need some social support from our state, they can stay here under another title of protection, which is our national. So we count with some thousands of people joining this new status which we created, and it's just the way how to make for the people living here also possible just to plan the future also here in Czechia, also in the Czech Republic. But on the other hand, we try to create a network for Ukrainians that then are still in contact with their country. We really support the feeling of Ukrainian identity, and we also support this Ukrainian hub, which should be focused on Ukrainians, and also not only on the processes of returns, but also on some kind of support of culture, life, culture events, some help also in the language education. We want to create a place where the Ukrainians meet and they have the feeling that they still have the close connection to their country. But to speak frankly, it's a challenge for Ukrainians. We can be helpful, but not the creator of the idea itself.
Thank you, Minister. And one more question, if I may. Clearly, Czechia is taking a very forward-leaning position on this. Is there anything that you would like to see European partner states do more of, or indeed the European Commission?
First of all, the Czechia had the presidency of the EU at the beginning of the war. So we, as the Czech Republic, we were the decision maker. We were the creators of a lot of processes which are still alive. And we have also good cooperation with the Commission. Our commissioner coming from the Czech Republic is responsible for the relationships with the third countries, so we can also use his position for close communication with Commission. But what we are focused on today, it's just the time after the war. What we will do with the temporary protection, how we can prevent the secondary migration waves coming not only from Ukraine, but also within the EU. that what we really need as the EU is a common solution which will create the same conditions or very similar conditions for Ukrainians in all EU countries. Yes, for us as the Czech Republic, it's something what we really have to find some concrete solution because we have high number of Ukrainians. But to speak frankly, it's not always easy to open the Ukrainian topic on the EU level because not for all countries is it a topic of the highest importance. Because yes, we have the countries in the south of Europe. They have to find the right solution for the illegal migration. So the position of the Czech Republic is to open this topic, to just keep on in the frank discussion on the European level and to find a common European solution for the situation after the war.
Thank you, Minister. That's really, really helpful. I wonder if I can move back to Elena just to pick up on the European point and how we ensure that unity of purpose, and also perhaps just to tackle that question of temporary protected status and what the perspectives for that are going forwards.
Thank you very much. Unity of purpose. I would say that the EU, I'm working for 2 decades for the Commission, and I have seen different crises hitting us since I started. You know, the democracy deficit at the beginning, the economic crisis, migration crisis, COVID, and the war. I can tell you how I perceive the member states on the question of Ukraine is there is almost unity. There are some dissenting views on particular issues, but I think this is one of the let's say topics, and it's recurrent. It's at a high level fora, etc. So it's not, let's say, declining in terms of importance of the discussions. It is rather, there is a unanimous approach to the fact that Ukraine is also a question of security of the EU. So there is a sort of enlightened self-interest that the member states feel. Now, in the coming weeks, the Commission will make a proposal. So I cannot go into the detail because the necessary discussions have to take place. And of course, then it's the question also of member states taking a stance on the proposal of the Commission. I know that for many people, there is a blur in terms of in the institutions. The Commission makes proposals and the member states and the Parliament adopts it. And I think there is this sort of thinking going on, like we cannot just, do a sort of annual prolongation, but there must be some sort of structural alternative coming forward. But we also need, indeed, the Ukraine government and the local authorities to reassure Ukrainians and to make sure that they can return. I cannot judge myself as to where the sort of emotional attachment to where you are from and the economic reality, how they score. I guess it's very different for very different people. I've met with young, amazing, talented leaders who left their studies abroad and they are now in the city councils in Vinica, in Kyiv, in Kharkiv, etc., working for the local authorities. So there it will be very different. But I just want to say it's a teamwork. We work in a dilemma situation. It's a teamwork. And we have seen countries where, unfortunately, until now, 3 decades after the war, like Bosnia and Herzegovina, not everybody has returned, So analogies are dangerous. It's very, very much of a short and quick thinking, but it's unavoidable also to look at some of these experiences. And just to say, the European integration, I have reformulated a little bit the question, but it is true. Can act in a way that, again, the skilled, the qualified will leave to the institutions. We have seen it with Croatia. 500,000 Croats actually left, and they work abroad. So that's that's a reality, and that's where the job really of the Ukraine leadership is.
Thank you very much. Really helpful and insightful there, Elena, just to give that perspective. We have just under 15 minutes left. We have lots of questions coming in. I will not have the time to put all of those questions, but I assure all of you, trying to cover as much ground as I possibly can to cover the topics that you are raising. I'm going to turn to Olga. I have a couple of questions for you. The first, this recurrent question coming from people online, particularly the diaspora, about how the Ukrainian government can more systematically involve Ukrainians outside of Ukraine in Ukraine's reconstruction.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry that the minister is not with us here who could speak on behalf of the government about the strategy that they've already put in place. And we know that these unity hubs are being opened in various countries now that would facilitate Ukrainians' return, but not only, they would also provide services to Ukrainians in countries that they are currently reside. My understanding is that they would complement the work of Ukrainian diplomatic representations, like embassies and consulates, unfortunately, who are under a huge strain since the start of the full-scale invasion, because their capacities are not enough to respond to all the needs for consular services that Ukrainian citizens now have. So my understanding is that the work of the Ministry of Unity would also help the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to address those needs of Ukrainians who are resident abroad. I think that's a very important first step into kind of maintaining those ties, into keeping that loyalty of Ukrainian citizens who are currently abroad to their state, so that people do not feel they are abandoned, or they do not feel they cannot access some basic services such as replacement, getting a new passport, or a birth certificate for kids who were born abroad, or they have to wait for months for that because the resources are just inadequate. So that is starting to change. So that's one thing that could be done, improve this the quality and the capacity of those services that the state of Ukraine could provide to its residents abroad. Then obviously other steps in direction of fostering these ties with diaspora are another thing that the minister mentioned, working on strengthening that Ukrainian identity, keeping the ties of Ukrainians with their homeland by supporting cultural initiatives, opening more Ukrainian schools. With this also, the host countries, they can help with this. They can help with providing Ukrainian kids opportunities to learn their language or have exams, for example, in Ukrainian. I know that there has been recently a visit of Ukrainian education minister to the UK who met with his counterpart here. And there was an indication on behalf of the UK Education Ministry that Ukrainian language would be possible for Ukrainian kids to have as a choice on the GCSE level exams. And I think that's a very, very important step in the right direction. Again, that became possible in cooperation between the Ukrainian government and the government of the country that hosts a large number of Ukrainians. Well, some other steps that I mentioned in my paper are law on multiple citizenship. Again, something that is already in the making. When I started working on this paper, it was a very early stage, but now the first draft has been passed by the Ukrainian parliament. This law basically would legalize practice of having multiple nationalities for Ukrainian citizens, something that was a reality that de facto happened before, but was in a bit of a gray zone. It was not legally recognized as a practice that is that Ukraine kind of accepts and legally recognizes. So this law on multiple citizenship would just make it easier for many Ukrainians abroad, those people who have been living there for many years, who have got this dual nationality, because it makes their life in their countries of residence so much easier. So they will not be now living in this gray area, and it would make their movement between the countries more easy, and it would encourage potentially also maybe younger generations of people with Ukrainian heritage to move to Ukraine to participate in rebuilding and reconstruction. It was mentioned today that remittances from Ukrainians abroad, they constitute a big contribution to the Ukrainian GDP. Indeed, this is a fact, although this number has not changed significantly since 2022, when the number of Ukrainians has increased dramatically, of Ukrainians who are abroad. Well, for obvious reasons, because these people were refugees. Many of them didn't have jobs. They had to rely also on some social support in countries that temporarily host them, temporarily or permanently, we will see. But as these people integrate, settle, they get jobs, they become more financially independent. It is very probable that the amount of remittances would increase, and I think the Ukrainian government could encourage that, could channel those remittances into reconstruction projects, could potentially issue some diaspora bonds, a practice that has been already tested by some other countries with big diasporas abroad. And this is kind of another policy that could be implemented in order to foster these ties with diaspora, and kind of also give diaspora the sense of contribution, of belonging, of making a difference. Then there are other options such as political representation, bigger decision making, just ensuring the ability for Ukrainians who are abroad to participate in the elections, something that is not a given, something that is not happening by default. We don't know, of course, when the next elections will happen in Ukraine. Currently, under martial law, they are prohibited, and just the conditions, the security conditions, are not in place to hold elections in Ukraine. But by the time the new elections are held in Ukraine, in I don't know how much time will pass until then, there must be some work done to ensure that these large numbers of Ukrainians that are currently abroad, that they have access to a voting process. Because previously we know that, again, the capacities of Ukrainian diplomatic representations were not enough, even pre-2022, to allow all those Ukrainians who wanted to vote in the elections to do so. A lot of people had to travel for hundreds of kilometers to the nearest diplomatic representation to be able to cast their vote. This is unsustainable now with this huge number of Ukrainians abroad. So this issue needs to be addressed in one way or another, by either by opening more physical spaces for Ukrainians abroad to be able to vote in the elections, or by offering a possibility to vote in an electronic way. Then obviously this raises all sorts of other issues with the security and Russian cyber attacks and all potential interference in the elections. However, this is something that can be thought of ahead, and the preparations to this can start as early as now.
Thank you, Olga. Time is against us. I'm going to ask you one last question, a slightly more specific question, but I think a very good one, which is concerning those Ukrainians who've left Ukraine who have disabilities, and the challenges of returning to Ukraine, particularly Ukraine, where now with so much destruction, what measures do you think should be put in place to help support the returns of those with disabilities and who have certain needs, and how can the Ukrainian government support?
Yeah, absolutely. That's an excellent question. And this not only concerns Ukrainians abroad who have disabilities, but Ukrainians in Ukraine. And obviously now when we talk about the reconstruction, and I know that the focus on many of the conferences and panels focused on Ukrainian reconstruction has been on how to make sure that this reconstruction is not just rebuilding what was already there before 2022, but rebuilding in a new way, in a barrier-free way, meaning barriers, not just physical barriers, but also all other sorts of barriers. So the focus of reconstruction needs to take into consideration the needs of people with disabilities, with special needs. And access to healthcare is a very important issue as well. I've spoken with some Ukrainian refugees who are very loyal to Ukraine, who really can't wait to return, but who have very serious health conditions. And they say that currently in their countries, in the countries that they are temporarily residing, they get access to free childcare. and something that they wouldn't have in Ukraine. And that's basically holding them back from returning, because they say, I have children, like I wouldn't be able to receive this childcare in Ukraine, especially now that the healthcare system is under such a huge strain because of the amount of people wounded and people with casualties, and the outflow also of the medical personnel. And they just like stay abroad because of that, because they can get access to childcare. Here, I think some contribution and help and assistance of countries, Ukraine's partners, like financial assistance into Ukraine healthcare system, is something that could make a difference. And of course, the continuation of the healthcare reform that was underway in Ukraine already before 2022.
Thank you. Yelena, you wanted to come in on this very quickly.
Yes, I wanted to come on the disabilities. When I traveled in Ukraine, what surprised me very much, rather on the, I would say, positive side, although, I know how it may sound, is how much the society starts preparing for living next to people with disabilities. I mean, you can see it from the rehabilitation centers that I visited, but also when you go, for instance, on a train, on a screen, you could see, somehow a family where everybody has some disability. Of course, this was a cartoon, and it made me think of me growing up in Czechoslovakia back in 70s, 80s, where people with disabilities would be normally in institutionalized care, and they would be outside the sight of society. So it would be sort of, shocking for you as a child to see a person with a certain visible disability. And that I found quite important, because there will be, due to war and due to war impacts, indeed, unfortunately, every day there will be this kind of impact, but that I felt extremely progressive. I mean, also compared to other Western societies we now live in. And maybe a little comment to Olga. Free childcare. I'm not sure that this really fully exists as a concept. There is always somebody that subsidizes childcare, be it state, be it a local authority, or you pay, for food, etc. So it's just I don't want us to work here with concept that seem to be giving some sort of too
I
much
was
of
talking about
honor.
healthcare. Obviously,
Okay,
it is paid by the taxpayers, but I was just quoting this person.
I think we'll avoid debates on public provision of childcare, but I think perhaps the way to bring that together is to talk about different benefits in different countries, perhaps being different to what one would receive in Ukraine, and the calculation that forms in people's thinkings. I'm afraid I'm going to have to cut it there, because we are up against the end of this webinar. And I would like to thank, first and foremost, the panel. Minister Rakusan, fantastic to have you with us. Thank you so much for talking to the extraordinary efforts that Czechia has gone to support Ukrainian refugees. Thank you to Olga for your fantastic paper, which we've put the link in the chat for people to access, and for your contribution, and also Elena as well, for giving us not just the insights of the institution that you work for, but also your very personal insights and thoughts as well, given your background. So thank you for that. I'd also like to say thank you to everybody for participating. Thank you for all of the questions. I hope we've managed to at least cover most of the ground. We will make sure that we collect those questions and circulate those around, because I think there's some very good questions and thought-provoking questions, particularly for the Ukrainian minister, who sadly got called away early, but we will make sure that those questions are forwarded. When this webinar finishes, you will, I am told, get an automatic pop-up on the screen This is an event survey about the discussion. It only takes 2 minutes to fill out, but we would very much like your feedback concerning today's webinar. And finally, I would just like to say a huge thank you to the team at Chatham House. That's Arisia, Melania, Phoebe, Anna, for putting together what has been a fantastic discussion, fantastic webinar. And thank you once again to everybody for taking part. Thank you.